Hello, bonjour, dear wine enthusiasts, and welcome to your new wine video. Today I'm particularly pleased to introduce you to my wine country, my wine region, as in the area I live in and where my family is from historically. Today I'm telling you about the Roussillon, this relatively little area at the very southern tip of France by the border with Spain. The bigger Languedoc-Roussillon, which encompasses a solid third of the French Mediterranean coast, is better known. That's the broader region. It is one of the biggest, if not the biggest wine region in France, and it used to be the biggest in Europe. But the Roussillon itself, which is only the southern end of the Languedoc-Roussillon, hasn't reached a great level of global fame so far. Let me contribute to changing this here. Let's promote the wines from Roussillon, or at least explain them. What's special about Roussillon compared to Languedoc and the rest of France? What kind of wine do we make here? Let's explain. Roussillon is essentially one large sedimentary triangular-shaped valley stuck between the Pyrenees Mountains to the south and the calcareous hills of the Corbière to the north. Because there are mountains to the north and to the south of the valley, this area was fought over between the French and the Spanish for a very long time in history. Sometimes the border of the two kingdoms was to the north, because there was a mountain there. Sometimes it was to the south. So Roussillon belonged to the kings of Catalonia sometimes, who ruled over the territories across the border around Barcelona, and sometimes it belonged to the French king. The whole thing was definitely settled in the 17th century, some 400 years ago, with the Treaty of the Pyrenees, which finally established definitely the border to the south, right on the natural border that are the Pyrenees Mountains. This just to say that Roussillon has a strong Catalan heritage which no other French region has had, including the Languedoc, because there was a border between the two in history. So Languedoc and Roussillon historically are different. The culture, the language of Languedoc and of Roussillon were different. No other French territory has belonged to a kingdom that is what is today's Spain, to Spain, even though it's not Spain, it's Catalonia. But no other French region has belonged to Spain like Roussillon has had in history, hence its unique culture. The Spanish never occupied France for very long, except for here. Wine-wise, the Greeks first established a settlement in the area and first planted vines around here around the 5th century BC. That's quite a long time ago. Then came in the Romans, which made of this area, now called Languedoc-Roussillon, a stronghold in the Gaul, from which they conquered the rest of France and Spain and the rest of Western Europe. Obviously, while this area was a key bastion for the Romans' conquest of France, they extensively planted vines here to provide abundant vines for their troops and settlers in Western Europe. So they planted tons of vines and they used to produce tons of wine here, right here, to supply their troops all over Europe. That's the history of Roussillon in very short as I could make it. But let's talk about the wines, shall we? The most renowned, popular and important wines made in Roussillon today are red. The valley is about 40 miles deep and 40 miles wide. And when wine consumption was at its peak in France around the 1970s or 1980s, when essentially every French adult would drink on average around 200 liters of wine per year, yes, we used to drink a lot of wine, the whole valley floor was virtually covered in vineyards, pumping out a ton of wine, producing cheap but tasty and fairly strong sunny wine. Now that quality matters more than quantity for wine consumers, including in France, the remaining vineyards are more patchy in the valley, some still on the valley floor, but many of the best ones are on the hilly flanks of the valley. Essentially, most vineyards have been pulled out over time, or many hectares or acres have been pulled out, and only the best ones have remained. But those are cherished by smaller producers, while cooperative wineries that were massive before were definitely king in the area. The result is that terroirs are quite varied here. Pockets of granite soil, some schist, some sand and gravel, and even limestone make for a patchwork of growing conditions and soils. Roussillon is the sunniest region in France, with a hot Mediterranean climate in summer, mild winters and very little rainfall, so wines are basically rich and powerful, made from the traditional southern French grape varieties. Grenache is one of the main grapes here, with Carignan a close second, while Mourvèdre and Syrah are also very common. Most reds are blended here. In fact, the AOP appellation of Côte du Roussillon and Côte du Roussillon villages, which are the main two appellations here, require wines to be blended from different grapes. It's a requirement. You have to blend them, because that's how it was done traditionally. But many producers, however, choose to release varietal wines as well, 100% Grenache, 100% Syrah or Mourvèdre, to express the specificity of those styles and the uniqueness of certain old vine vineyards that we have here. If you have a great old vine Syrah, you want to bottle it on its own. But those have to come under an IGP, Côte Catalane or Catalan Coast appellation, because you can't have the AOP appellation because you have to blend for that. It's a bit technical, but let's move on. To the very south, on the rocky coastal end of the Pyrenees Mountains, essentially when the Pyrenees fall into the Mediterranean, lies a port village famous for having hosted Henri Matisse, the illustrious painter. In 1905, he stayed in the village of Collioure, and here started the Fauvism artistic movement that made him famous. He started it right here. The terraced vineyards on dry, rocky schist soils that surround Collioure give birth to some of the best dry reds in Roussillon too, under the Collioure appellation. Roussillon traditionally produced large amounts of fortified sweet wines, red fortified wines comparable to the Portuguese ports, like in the appellation of Banyuls, which is a town just next to Collioure, but also sweet muscat whites produced in the valley near Rivesaltes. Those dessert or aperitif sweet fortified wines remain the historic pride of the area, and they're certainly worth tasting. They can be absolutely delicious. A great French alternative to ports, if you ask me, but those styles sell a lot less globally nowadays. Not many people drink sweet wines anymore, so many producers have switched from making sweet red wines to making dry wines, hence the renaissance of table reds here. Roussillon also produces quite a lot of rosé wines in a similar dry style as in Provence, although with a little more body and color as well. Roussillon rosés, made from the same grapes as the reds, are extremely popular locally, quenching the thirst essentially of millions of French and Northern European tourists that enjoy spending their time in summer vacations on our sunny beaches. Well, when they go to a restaurant, they order some delicious, dry, fresh, crisp, cold rosé. Finally, even though a little more niche, Roussillon also makes interesting dry whites that can be surprisingly zingy and mineral, as well as being fruity and punchy, especially from coastal vineyards like in Collioure or on the hilly altitude vineyards on the flanks of the valley. White grapes used here include Grenache Blanc, Vermentino and Macabeo for the technical side. You've heard it from me, a local. Roussillon is a diverse and somewhat complex area to understand. I only summarized it here as densely as I could, but you could hear that to introduce Roussillon to you, I had to touch on many different complicated facets of history, terroir, geography, topography, grapes, wine style, etc. So it's difficult to market Roussillon to a global audience as it lacks a nice, simple, catchy, monolithic appeal. So you just can't say Roussillon make this type of wine. Well, it makes a whole variety. But for those who know, however, this complexity and diversity makes it particularly interesting to discover because the wines are delicious as well. Many small producers bathed in our hot Mediterranean climate with cooling influences from the sea, great terroirs of granite and schist and limestone, and the rare ability to blend together those different components that usually live far away from one another. Also, the pride of a unique local identity. Those are just a few of the fascinating components that contribute to Roussillon wine's character. You had a delicious example in our last French collection from the club, and now you know why it is so good. Because there's a lot happening in the background, a lot of history and a lot of savoir-faire. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon in the wonderful world of wine. Cheers!